Do you think the scariest thing in wild Africa is a hungry lion circling your camp at night? Or a crocodile rising from a muddy river without warning? Most people do. Every wildlife documentary produced in the last 50 years has reinforced that assumption. Teeth, claws, and size, framed against open savanna and a sunset. Africa, in the popular imagination, kills you the way movies say it does. Visibly, dramatically, and from a direction you can see coming. But if you set foot inside the Congo Basin, the second largest tropical forest on Earth, the thing most likely to kill you has no eyes, no claws, and in some cases, no body at all. It is the forest itself, operating through heat, geology, biology, and microscopic life, simultaneously, without pause. This is the story of what the Congo Basin actually is, and what it actually does. When you enter it, hit that subscribe button. This goes deeper than any documentary you've seen. Don't gamble on finding this again. The Congo Basin covers approximately 1.4 million square miles, larger than Alaska, larger than all of Western Europe. It is the least mapped inhabited landmass outside Antarctica. If you grew up watching National Geographic documentaries about Africa, what you saw was almost always the Serengeti. Open plains, visible predators, dramatic light. The Congo was the background, dark, dense, largely unfilmed. Scientists describe it as a biodiversity hotspot. That description is accurate. It is also dangerously incomplete. What the data actually shows is a self-contained survival system that spent 60 million years refining every mechanism it possesses to resist intrusion. Heat, humidity, geology, biology, and microbiology operate here simultaneously at levels found nowhere else on Earth in combination. We call it the green hell. That name, it turns out, understates the case. 7 layers, from the air down to the ground, from the visible down to the invisible. The first layer alone is already more immediately lethal than any predator the Congo contains, and you will understand exactly why before the next 3 minutes have passed. Inside the Congo Basin's forest canopy, the humidity almost never drops below 95%. The air temperature stays above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and an unprotected person loses consciousness from heat exhaustion within 2 to 3 hours, before any animal ever locates them. That is not a dramatic estimate. That is standard medical documentation from field research teams operating inside the basin. To understand why, you need to understand what the forest canopy actually does. The Congo's layers, emergent trees, reaching 200 feet, a mid-canopy at roughly 100, and a dense understory below, function together as a sealed thermal envelope. Sunlight enters, but cannot leave. Moisture rises from the forest floor, hits the canopy's ceiling, and falls again. The same air cycles continuously. There is no wind at ground level. There is no evaporative cooling. The human body's primary defense against overheating, perspiration, becomes functionally useless when the surrounding air is already holding as much moisture as it physically can. Consider what that means in practice. You are not walking through heat. You are walking through heat that actively prevents your body from responding to it. Field medics working with research teams in the basin describe the progression with clinical precision. Mild disorientation within 90 minutes, loss of fine motor coordination within 2 hours, and heat stroke, the phase at which the body's core thermoregulation shuts down, within 3. That timeline applies to fit, acclimatized adults carrying adequate water. It is not significantly extended by experience or physical conditioning. Now, layered disorientation on top of that. The basin sits on one of Central Africa's largest iron ore geological formations. That iron disrupts local magnetic fields. Compasses drift, sometimes by as much as 15 degrees, without warning. GPS signals scatter beneath the triple canopy, particularly in valleys and near ridge lines. And visually, the forest presents an identical landscape in every direction. The same tree density, the same undergrowth, the same quality of filtered light. Research teams equipped with full navigation technology have documented returning to their starting position after 40 minutes of what felt like confident forward movement. Stop and translate that into physical reality. A person can enter the Congo Basin on a clear morning with water, A, compass, and a GPS device, and be in mortal danger before noon, without encountering a single predator. The forest does not need to chase you. It only needs to confuse you long enough for the heat to finish the work. This is the first layer: climate, terrain, and the invisible architecture of disorientation, and on its own, it is a more immediate threat to survival than anything with teeth in this forest. But disorientation and heat are only the surface. The next threat does not move through the forest at all. It waits beneath the water in a lake that looks entirely safe and holds one of the most catastrophic geological mechanisms on Earth. Lake Kivu holds more dissolved carbon dioxide than any other lake on Earth. Enough gas, according to volcanologists, at the Royal Museum for Central Africa, to suffocate every person within a 20-mile radius if the lake's stratified layers were disturbed by a single significant seismic event. This is not a worst-case projection. It is the documented baseline measurement of what is currently sitting beneath that surface. Lake Kivu sits on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. It is one of Africa's great Rift Valley lakes, deep, blue, and in photographs, genuinely beautiful. Approximately 2.5 million people live along its shores. Fishing boats cross it every morning. Children swim in its shallows. And at the bottom of that lake, under immense geological pressure, sits an estimated 300 cubic kilometers of dissolved carbon dioxide and methane gases that have been accumulating for thousands of years as volcanic activity beneath the lakebed releases them continuously into the water above. The term for what happens when those gases release suddenly is a limnic eruption. Imagine it this way. The lake is a carbonated bottle that has been shaken continuously for centuries. Under normal conditions, the pressure keeps the gas dissolved and invisible. A single sufficient disruption, a significant seismic event, a volcanic shift beneath the floor can trigger a chain reaction in which the dissolved gas rises faster than it can disperse, erupting from the surface as a dense, silent, toxic cloud, moving outward with the wind. We know exactly what that looks like. On the night of August 21, 1986, Lake Nyos, in Cameroon, a smaller lake with the same geological mechanism, released approximately 80 million cubic meters of carbon dioxide in under an hour. The gas cloud rolled silently downhill through the surrounding valleys. By morning, 1,800 people were dead. No explosion, no flood, no fire. The villages simply went quiet. Lake Kivu holds approximately 2,000 times more gas than Lake Nyos held on that night. 2,000 times. Scientists have proposed methane extraction systems to reduce the pressure, and some operational installations exist, but the extraction rate lags significantly behind the accumulation rate. The lake continues to fill. That is the second layer, still, silent, and hidden beneath a surface that looks completely ordinary. And now the forest above it wakes up. The Doralus ant, called the driver ant, or the safari ant, travels in columns of up to 50 million individuals. Each ant is approximately half an inch long. None of them can see. The colony navigates entirely by chemical signal, functioning as a single coordinated organism rather than a collection of separate creatures. A Doralus column is typically 3 to 4 inches wide and can extend for over 300 feet in length. That does not sound fast. It is not the speed that matters. A tethered animal, a goat, any creature that cannot move away from the column's path is overwhelmed by density, not by individual force. The Doralus mandible is curved and designed to grip rather than release. Death does not come from a single bite. It comes from suffocation, as ants cover the nose and throat, combined with blood loss from tens of thousands of simultaneous puncture wounds. Documented cases exist. They are not legend. The irony here is precise. This colony of 50 million blind insects, moving through one of the most disorienting environments on Earth, is one of the most accurately coordinated biological systems ever scientifically documented. It operates with a consistency that no other organism of comparable scale approaches. The third layer is not chaotic. It is efficient. And in the Congo Basin, efficiency is always more dangerous than aggression. A hippopotamus kills more humans in Africa every year than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined. And the reason has nothing to do with aggression, and everything to do with the fact that the river is its territory, and you have just entered it. The International Union for Conservation of Nature estimates between 500 and 3,000 hippo-related fatalities annually across sub-Saharan Africa, with the Congo River system accounting for a disproportionate share of that total. The image most people carry of a hippopotamus is of something slow, heavy, and vaguely manageable. That image has been shaped by zoos and by documentaries filmed at a safe distance. The operational reality on the water is entirely different. A bull hippopotamus weighs between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds. Underwater, it moves at 19 miles per hour, nearly 4 times faster than the fastest human swimmer. Its jaw opens to an angle of 150 degrees and exerts a bite force of approximately 1,800 pounds per square inch. Scale that into physical terms. A hippopotamus jaw is 18 inches wide at full extension. The force distributed across that surface is capable of severing a 12-foot wooden boat. This has been photographed. It has been documented in river patrol reports along the Congo. The Congo River's hippopotamus population is one of the densest on Earth. The river is their territory. Anyone crossing by boat or on foot is, in every biological sense, the invasive organism in that transaction. But the most unsettling part of this investigation is still ahead, because the Congo Basin's most efficient killer has no jaw, no teeth, and no visible presence at all. A scratch from a thorn on the forest floor can turn septic and fatal within 48 hours, not because the thorn is toxic, but because the soil, water, and air of the Congo Basin carry a density of biological agents, bacteria, parasites, and fungi that has no parallel in any other ecosystem on Earth. The human immune system evolved on African grasslands and in temperate climates. It was not built for this. Plasmodium falciparum, the malaria parasite, transmitted by the Anopheles mosquito, is hyperendemic across the entire basin. That term means it is not an epidemic that arrives and recedes. It is always present, everywhere, at high levels, as a permanent condition of the environment. The World Health Organization estimates the Congo Basin accounts for more than 12% of all global malaria cases annually. Consider what that percentage means. One ecosystem, 12% of a disease that infects over 200 million people every single year. Then there is Trypanosoma brucei, the parasite carried by the tsetse fly that causes sleeping sickness. Its mechanism is specific and deeply unsettling. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and disrupts the neurological signals that regulate sleep, causing the victim to lose the boundary between waking and unconsciousness. Disorientation comes first, then uncontrollable sleep episodes during daylight hours, then coma. Untreated, it is nearly always fatal. The tsetse fly does not bite at night. It bites in daylight, along riverbanks, exactly where people fish and travel. River blindness, onchocerciasis, caused by a parasitic worm transmitted through black fly bites near fast-moving water, affects millions in the basin. The worm does not kill. It migrates to the eye tissue and destroys vision progressively, over years, without pain, without warning. The fourth and fifth layers of the Congo Basin are not dramatic. They are quiet, systemic, and older than human civilization. They were present in this forest before the first human being ever entered it. They operate continuously, without rest, and without preference for any particular target. But the most unsettling part is still ahead, because every threat we have named is a product of the same underlying process. And that process has been running without interruption for 60 million years. The forest elephant of the Congo Basin is 20% smaller than its savanna cousin. Its tusks angle downward instead of forward, and its feet are wider and rounder. Every single one of those differences a direct biological response to a forest that punishes anything too large to move through it quickly. This is not the passive effect of isolation. This is evolution, under active pressure, operating with a specificity that maps precisely onto the threats this forest generates. The principle at work is called island biogeography. The same process that drives speciation on remote oceanic islands, except here the isolation is not water. it is canopy. The Congo Basin's forest cover creates the same selective pressure as a remote island. Species that enter and cannot adapt to its conditions do not survive long enough to reproduce. Those that can, change. In body size, in tooth and tusk structure, in behavioral range to match the environment's specific demands. The forest does not hide these animals. It makes them invisible. The okapi is the defining case. It is the closest living relative of the giraffe. It lives exclusively in the deep Congo Basin, and it was completely unknown to Western science until 1901, despite being a large, distinctive mammal in a region that European explorers had been attempting to chart since the 1880s. Local Congolese communities had known of it for generations. Explorers who heard descriptions concluded they were listening to mythology. It was not mythology. It was a forest so dense that a large, warm-blooded mammal could remain scientifically undescribed for decades in a region under active exploration. The Lasula monkey, a distinct primate species, was formally described by science in 2012. Not retrieved from a remote DNA sample. Observed, studied, photographed, and officially classified in 2012 in a forest that had been nominally accessible to researchers for over a century. Which brings us to Microscopic. The legend, a large, long-necked creature said to inhabit the deep Congo waterways, appears in oral accounts from dozens of separate Congolese communities across at least 2 centuries. Western expeditions in the 1970s and 1980s investigated and returned without conclusive evidence. The standard interpretation was that the legend reflected misidentification, colonial anxiety, or imagination shaped by isolation. The more precise interpretation is different. The Congo Basin is a documented environment in which large mammals remain unknown to Western science for over a century, where sound travels unpredictably through dense canopy, where decomposition eliminates biological evidence within days in the heat and humidity, where the water is dark with dissolved organic matter and underwater visibility is effectively zero. In that environment, the rational response to encountering something large and unidentified is not to wait for a photograph. It is to name it, describe it, and pass the description forward. The legends are not confusion. They are the most accurate information available about a forest that has always resisted complete documentation. That resistance is not mystical. It is geological, biological, and entirely consistent with every layer we have moved through. Every layer we have moved through: the sealed thermal envelope, the volcanic lake, the coordinated insect column, the territorial river megafauna, the systemic microscopic biological load, the evolutionary pressure chamber, and the legends born from genuine scientific invisibility. These are not 7 separate phenomena. They are one system. The Congo Basin formed as the African tectonic plate shifted along its eastern rift zone, creating the topographic bowl that contains the world's 2nd largest river drainage. That rifting is still active. The volcanic activity beneath Lake Kivu is not historical. It is ongoing, measurable, and continuously monitored. The geological isolation that produced the basin also produced the climate system above it. The canopy generates rainfall. The rainfall feeds the rivers sustain the biological density. And that density creates the evolutionary pressure that has been reshaping species here for 60 million years without interruption. What that means, structurally, is this: every element of the Congo Basin reinforces every other element. The humidity that overwhelms human thermoregulation also creates ideal conditions for plasmodium. The Arnor geology that distorts compasses shaped the soil chemistry that accelerates bacterial proliferation. The forest density that concealed the okapi from science for a century conceals every other organism large enough to generate a legend. Consider what that requires of anyone attempting systematic study. A research team in the Congo Basin must manage heat exhaustion, magnetic navigation failure, biological threat, vectors from soil, water, and air, large animal territorial risk, and insect colony patterns, not sequentially, but simultaneously, in a forest that actively erases landmarks. No other major ecosystem on Earth presents that combination at that scale. The Amazon basin approaches it on biological density, but lacks the geological instability. The Siberian taiga presents comparable navigation difficulties, but without the biological load. The Congo is singular. This is why the basin remains, in 2026, the least understood major ecosystem on the planet, not because it has been neglected, not because science has lacked interest, but because sustained rigorous field research there requires operating inside all of these systems at once. It is not a hostile environment. It does not select for any particular target. It simply built its own logic before we arrived. And that logic does not include provisions for our comfort or our safety. The forest is not hostile. It is indifferent, and indifference, at Tatskale, is more formidable than any hostility. What this investigation reveals, taken together, is not a catalogue of dangers. It is a portrait of a world that developed entirely without reference to human presence, and whose architecture, as a consequence, is simply not arranged around our survival. We built our mythology of Africa around the things we could see and name. The lion, the elephant, the crocodile. We looked at the Congo and called it dark, because we could not see into it. We did not consider that it was not dark, only that it was lit according to entirely different instructions. Instructions that had been running for 60 million years before the first human eye tried to read them. What the Congo Basin is, finally, is a reminder that the Earth's logic preceded ours, that the parts of the natural world we cannot map are not gaps in our knowledge. They are evidence that the world is larger and older than our ability to describe it. There are still species in that forest that science has not named. There are still geological processes operating beneath those lakes that no instrument has fully resolved. The jungle was never empty. We just couldn't see it. We're one layer deeper than when we started. Subscribe and follow this investigation wherever it leads.